Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on this IvyCap Day 2023, the theme of which is Return of Dragons. And we are very, very grateful to you for making time for us. And since I know that you are busy with a lot of things, I will straight away run into my questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Smita, and thanks to Vikram and IvyCap. It's good to be here.
Sure, sir. So, because this particular panel is going to talk about sustainability, the next frontier for venture-backed companies, we are keen to understand how is SIDBI furthering the purpose of sustainability, and also that we are also, seeing a lot of discussions and talks about ESG, SDG lens on investments already. So, what do you see sustainability's role will be in the near future for VCs and startups in fundraising?
That's a very wide question. So I think, first of all, the definition of sustainability itself is, sort of is open to interpretations. The way we look at it at SIDBI is it is going across much more than what is typically known as ESG. So we're really looking at how things like food and health and other such matters which are more germane to developing countries, how that also needs to come in within a wider definition of sustainability. So when I transform that context into an MSME context, it's really about sustainability of several small businesses, and therefore you're necessarily looking at the sort of single proprietorship or entrepreneur who is sort of running that small business, but most of the time it's obviously with the help of the family. And then of course we are talking about how to help generate food from various new sources. Now that's something which again there's a lot of experimentation going on. Recently, I was in a meeting where we had the head of the CSIR labs, and it's quite incredible how CSIR is doing a lot of deep science work in various areas of sustainability. So, when you look at sustainability as a country perspective, there's a lot to do. But I think particularly when we look at it from the space of the venture and the entrepreneur who is taking money from the VC and the PE community, that sort of makes it and puts it into a slightly different perspective, which I'm sure it'll interest a lot of the people who are here today. And I think there are some good takeaways that at least I have, which I'd like to share with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And I think SIDBI is doing great work and definitely a guiding light for other such institutions who are looking into building a more sustainable world. Moving on to my next question here, sir, is so as we translate from SMEs, MSMEs to startups and VCs, one of the core aspects of sustainability that we believe is good governance. And we like to also believe that this is the core pillar on which environmental and social impact can be driven by the private businesses. Now, businesses, particularly startups, are still driven by profitability in its narrow definition of single bottom line. How do you see the ecosystem, particularly the startups and VCs, do this ESG and SDGs integration?
No, thanks for that segue, because that's really what I was looking forward to talk about how we have viewed the behavior patterns of the promoters, of the founders, and also the behavior pattern of the funders. So be it a VC or a PE, and I think more the emphasis comes on the VCs because they end up hand holding the founders at a much more nascent stage of development. And therefore I think we need to also assign the responsibilities accordingly. I think we cannot expect a founder to start thinking beyond profitability of the business. And my entire sort of sympathies lie with the founders, because it's altogether a competitive world. It's a difficult journey that they are trying to climb, and therefore I would not like to sort of shift their view away from profitability. But and this is really where I think we need to put the responsibility of ESG onto the shoulders of the VCs. Unfortunately, sometimes we see that the VCs are probably more aggressive than the founder themselves. Now, this is really where I think the VCs have to be educated, made aware of their larger role. Now, if a VC is truly interested in development and mature development of a small business or a startup, I think the VC has to start bringing in various milestones which start ticking against the ESG parameters. So I'm saying in India, the social aspect or the S of the ESG is something which we still need to stress upon. I really feel that we need a lot more gender parity. We need a lot more women in the workplace. We need, a basic hygiene in the workplace. We need workers to be looked after. We need, again, it's slightly outdated, but we certainly must ensure that we don't have child labor. So, there are many aspects of the social part, which is today moving more towards women development and women participation. And I think it's very critical for us to do that. The E part is, I think, uh, happening. Luckily, India has not, been really a large polluter in the world. But if we were to develop, and we all want to develop in the way we see the developed world has already done, then our carbon emissions and our GHG emissions are going to go up substantially. So I think for a VC partner to be able to bring in and help the founder with the best of technology, with the most energy efficient methodologies, that is really, I think, an important role for the VCs to play, because there's nothing better than starting off on the right foot. So if I'm already getting into better technologies, lower, carbon emission technologies, then I'm on the right path. And I think lastly, but certainly not the least, but I'm saying lastly because from a maturity perspective, if we're looking at profits, and then we're looking at social aspects, and we're looking at the environmental aspects, which are all highly process driven, and which constitute the basic functioning of a particular company. I think the governance part needs to also come in without too much of delay. It might become the third or fourth pillar of this, but I think it becomes the most important pillar for a mature company. And I'll just take a minute to talk about why we think governance becomes the largest and most important tool when a founder converts his company from a pre-series A and moves into the series B and C. Because at that point of time, you are entirely customer facing. You are dealing with variety of commercial transactions. So, all the way from just related party transactions down to, your ability to uh, give a forecast of your business, all that is what I would say comes within the word governance. So, governance is really not just about how a board is functioning, that is an extremely important part, but it is really about the way a founder interacts with the external world, from his customers to stakeholders to even the wider media. So the aspects of governance, I think, need to come in, and obviously there's a lot of help that the founder will need. And I'm really putting a lot of the onus for good governance and right governance upon the responsibility items, which I think the VCs and the PEs will sort of make sure happens, and sort of takes root within the company. So I can only say that, whatever support is needed from the community, kindly reach out to us at whichever forum possible, and we'll certainly take this journey forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your guiding words, and thank you for your presence, even if it was remotely there. I mean, you were remotely present, but it's very auspicious as well as precious for us to have you here. So thank you so much again for joining us and giving us your sharing with us your thoughts on sustainability for the VCs and the for the investors and the entrepreneurs. So thanks again, sir.
Thank you for having me here. Thanks a lot.
Welcome to this panel of sustainability, which is obviously the next frontier for the venture-backed companies. I would like to welcome my panelists on board. I just wanted to make sure that while the setup is being done, we don't waste our time. So before getting into this discussion about the topic, I wanted to decode sustainability for anybody who's not so familiar, while there may be very few people such. But I'm personally, my introduction to the word sustainability started with the words of Gro Harlem Brundtland, where she said that sustainability is the approach of development where we use the resources in such a way, or where we use the resources in such a way that we don't compromise the ability of the future generation. So we use the resources in present in such a way that we do not compromise on the ability of the future generations to meet their needs. Now, while our for the initial discussion on sustainability, this was a good thought. But as I realized, are we able to even meet our current needs or present needs with all the resources that we are using? While we should ideally be careful of making sure that we replenish all the resources that we are using. But I believe that we will have to have a very different approach to sustainability, where it's not just about leaving for the future generation, but also trying to make ends meet for the current one. We still have a lot of poverty, we still have a lot of hunger, we still have a lot of population which does not have access to proper health care, clean water, or clean energy. I think even with the current resource usage, which is more than what we should have, we are still in trouble. So with that definition, Ruchira, I'll come to you first. What does sustainability mean to you, particularly with respect to IFC at work? Yeah.
Thank you, Smita. And I think I will pick up from where you explained it, because to me and to IFC, sustainability is a much broader definition than the world usually thinks. And you're right, we are living in a world where we are fast depleting the resources around us. So sustainability is about living as consumers and as businesses in a manner where the world remains a productive, thriving, and safe home for the current and future generations. And so it is about being responsible consumers, being responsible as businesses. And in the context of our dialogue today, it's about being responsible investors as well as responsible startups. So I've used that word now, responsible, many times in this sentence, but what I mean is coming together as stakeholders to ensure that the E, S, and G is the very first and critical step, but it doesn't end there. A lot of the interventions and investments around climate will leave a sustainable world. The interventions around inclusion, and Mr. Ramann talked about gender, but it's all kinds of diversity that is important. And only then will we be building a future where the innovations and the development that we are seeing today is sustained over the decades to come.
Thank you so much, Ruchira. And on that front, very quick question. How does IFC actually leverage that, particularly in your own approach for investments on startups and VCs? Is that something you really harp on a lot?
Yes. So I'll start with the ENS component. So ES and G is very thoroughly evaluated at the start of every investment cycle. And the IFC ENS framework is out there, so everybody knows it, and it's sort of like a standard in the market today. We use that to evaluate the ENS practices of the company or the fund that we are going to be backing. And with that, we have a very thorough assessment, and we actually create a ENS action plan. And that action plan could be a 6-month action plan or an 18-month action plan, which we leave behind and we work with the startup or the fund to ensure that those practices are put in place, in which case it's just not at the investment alone, but also throughout the life cycle of our investment, that the company continues to follow those practices. So that's on the ENS front. On the climate front, again, a very strong focus for us. We have an entire department focused on climate tech interventions. We look at every investment that we do from a climate angle. We have a KPI on how many climate investments and what volume of climate investments we're supposed to be doing every year. So we take those targets very seriously. Similarly, on gender, every investment that we do is rated for whether or not it can be gender tagged basis certain KPIs that the founder or the GP has to commit to. So very metrics driven and extremely comprehensive, but at the same time, it's very assistive. So we do an assessment, but we want to assist the company or the fund that we are backing in putting these practices in place.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ruchira, for it. And on that note, maybe I'll carry forward that discussion with you, Rohan. So since you were one of the core people who have worked on the ESG ratings notification and regulation, I was interested in understanding that while there are the IFCs of the world who are actually encouraging the VCs and startups to use the sustainability lens, as a regulator, the fact that you've come up with this notification, what is your idea behind it? While the ESG market is growing, what is your idea behind this notification, and what impact do you think it will bring to the market?
Thank you, Smita, and a very good question. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for having me here. So before I begin, let me just put a disclaimer that whatever I say are my views and not necessarily those of SEBI.
Absolutely.
Having said that, fortunately, just yesterday an article came in Economic Times which said that companies who are rated high on ESG, they perform well and give better financial returns than companies who do not. They analyzed 13,000 companies who are publicly listed, and even in India, they compared ESG leaders with ESG laggards, and the return differential was 15.1% for the leaders and 7.8 or so for laggards. So you can see that there is a substantial difference, and apparently there is a financial incentive for performing well on ESG. And globally, what actually made SEBI come out with this regulation on ESG ratings, and actually regulators in US, UK, not US, but UK, EU, Singapore, Japan, all of them are trying or contemplating some regulatory or some voluntary code of conduct sort of thing for ESG ratings. The idea is the asset mandated under ESG is supposed to pretty much double among all globally professionally managed assets as per Deloitte. And a lot of times, these investors are signatories to UNPRI or PRB or these global initiatives which require ESG to be incorporated in decision making. And often, ESG rating is one of the simplest ways to incorporate ESG in your decision making. And but there is, so obviously ESG ratings are important.
Sure.
And in that aspect, that's why we wanted to have a regulatory framework in place so that there is clarity on what exactly ESG ratings are. There is transparency on the methodology that ESG rating providers follow. There is mitigation of conflict of interest. And while we have a very light touch regulation, just to safeguard those aspects, we came out with a regulation on that.
Sure. Thank you. So, yes, and I want to come back to you to talk about BRSR, but before I get into that, I have a quick question, actually, and I'll come to you, Swarup, for your thing, but let's say there is a startup here which is planning for an IPO in next 2-3 years, 4 years. How do you think these ESG ratings, sustainability metrics, all of them, would actually impact their IPO?
So at SEBI, we have mandated sustainability disclosures, which we call the business responsibility and sustainability reporting for listed entities and the top 1,000 listed entities by market capitalization. So for those entities, the BRSR disclosure is a must. And if you're a startup, you recall that recently in the G20 summit, we had Startup 20
Yeah.
come out with a governance framework.
Yeah.
And they gave that framework for different levels. And if you are a startup who are just about to come for an IPO, probably that level 3 of that governance framework would be very relevant to you.
Yeah.
Since in case you might fall into the top 1,000 listed companies, anyway, you need to require to disclose BRSR after you get listed and after you get into that market cap. But even before that, I would argue that there is a case to be made that ESG, especially governance, and as Ramann sir said, that even social aspects and increasingly climate risk, they are important. Investors are looking into it. The push for ESG is essentially driven by investor demand. And even if you are at an early stage and you're not thinking about an IPO, there is case to be made that you need to be ESG compliant or at least be compliant with the SDGs. There's a big alphabet soup in ESG. There's a lot of confusion. It's a very complex and kind of a new area. So over time, it will stabilize. But just to get started, I think if you can align your business activity with something as basic as sustainability development goals, for instance, that would help you very much.
Absolutely. Ruchira, would you like to add to him, add to this particular question on, what is the impact of all these sustainability metrics on a startup that's actually planning to go for an IPO soon?
Look, I think that investors, customers, suppliers, everybody is becoming more and more responsible to this issue of, and responding to this issue of sustainability. So having those measures in place, being able to show that you are conforming and that you're actually running a business that is not depletive of the resources we have today and is actually maybe in some way giving back to the society, being a little more cautious about your growth, at the same time, not compromising on financial results. That story will sell better at all stages, right? And it takes a lot of effort and resources, and it is, and we'll get the startup's perspective. It could be seen as a burden in the early years of a company's journey, and that's why I talked about how IFC helps its startups out. So in the early years, we need to make that extra effort, but it does pay off in the long run.
So on that note, Swarup, coming to you, one of the reasons I wanted Celcius to be on the platform is I actually like a lot of the work that you do as part of your business operations, which aligns with my definition of sustainability, which is far away from philanthropy, donation, and charity. So would you want to share about how Celcius integrates sustainability in their work, or particularly some of your sustainability initiatives that you could share?
Sure, Smita. So for a second, I forgot I was on the panel. I was listening to these guys, and you spoke about a startup who's looking to go into IPO next 4 or 5 years, so I'm that. Yeah. I in fact had questions. I was going to raise my hand and ask them questions. But yeah, when it comes to ESG, we honestly at the start of our journey, we were not very aware of the guidelines and the governance's policies that we had to do. In fact, Smita was the one who introduced us into a much deeper understanding of it. And coming from being a founder, we understood how important it is. But fortunately for us, so we work in cold supply chain. So as a basic nature of our business, it always works towards sustainability. In fact, the most sustainable we make our supply chain, the better profits we make. So it is not an afterthought for us. It's not something that we need to do just to be ESG compliant. It's the core of our business. So India fell on the hunger index this year. We all know that. And we end up wasting about 23% of our perishables, including medicines and all. That's a huge wastage. About $14 billion every year is what we are spending on that. What Celcius does is we work towards enhancing the supply chain, optimizing routes, working with small transporters, working with small cold storage owners, working with individuals in the market, helping them understand the business better, exposing them to bigger markets, making sure the assets that are available are filled to a much greater degree than what they were doing, utilizing current assets without having to introduce more. Obviously, we'll keep needing more, but that also means we are growing there. Optimizing the assets that we have today And especially when it comes to transportation, the trucks that are running on the ground, the cold storages which are running with huge machines, maintaining negative temperatures, we are working on optimizing on all that. Plus, we started working with a lot of small transporters right in the beginning of a journey, and we realized these guys are scared. They don't know where the business is going to come from. They don't know whether they can bank upon a customer. They don't know where their sales channel, their collections. They are scared to work out of their own territory. If they are from Tamil Nadu, that is the place they are comfortable with, but not rest of India. So no one was connecting them. We, in fact, came out with a scheme called VVY, which is Vahan Vikas Yojana. So nothing to do with Government of India. We just named it like that because people respond much better to it. It is aimed towards small transporters, small traders. In fact, we have a few housewives who joined our VVY very recently, who were referred by some of our other transporters. They just wanted a second source of income. So under VVY, they buy a vehicle, they make a refrigerated truck, they put it on a platform. We help them with the sales. We help them scale up their business. We help them earn a second source of income, which later on becomes a primary source of income for them. We are working closely with about 500 odd people who are very small. They are people who own anywhere between 1 to 5 trucks. We expose them to a much larger industry, and then we help them grow in that industry. So being asset light, we really don't own anything. But the main thing that we work with in cold supply chain is stopping wastages, making sure the perishables are available in the market, and they are not just thrown away because they either rot or they get spoiled on the way. And that, in core, is a sustainable business model for us.
Thanks, Swarup, for sharing this beautiful story. Actually, when I first heard about VVY, it was totally a very warm feeling to know that a business is actually looking into this. But give me a very quick, crisp answer, 30 seconds. Do you think all of this is an overhead for you? Do you think this takes a lot of time and this does not mean business to you? Any of these, whether route optimization for reducing emissions or working for helping more people get a job through you. All of this, is that philanthropy that you're doing? Are you doing it for charity?
Absolutely not. The more we optimize things, the more our margins are getting better. We earn more margins than what a typical transporter would. And that is because of the optimization that we bring in, the innovations that we bring in. We are making good profits just because we are able to see a larger picture and then help the smaller guys adhere to that picture. So not at all philanthropy, it's business.
Thank you so much. So I'll have one more question. We have just 3 more minutes. So very quickly to you, Rohan, and to you, Ruchira, and we can have crisp answers. So Rohan, 2011, we came out with BRR. 2023, we are standing with BRSR with 1,000 companies, top 1,000 companies by market cap to be, actually for them it is mandatory. Where do you see this going? When does startup get into this purview? Will it ever get into this purview? What's the roadmap that you're looking at?
So Smita, SEBI generally comes into picture post-IPO, and we have mandated BRSR not even for all listed companies, Correct. But only for the top 1,000 companies. MCA may operationalize BRSR Lite for unlisted companies or for startups. We already have a governance framework under the Startup 20 framework. But I think startups don't need to get boggled with all disclosures like BRSR that might be too comprehensive, that might overburden them. Some basic disclosures, maybe taking SDGs as your guidance, are more than enough. And depending on your investor requirements, because mainly the drive for ESG disclosures is coming from them, I think that is the way to go rather than...
MCA recommends BRSR Lite for the SMT. Yeah. Okay, sure. So I'll take that. On that note, Ruchira, with you quickly, has there ever been an investment that you made from where you pulled out because the businesses did not meet the ESG requirements or any of the SDGs or sustainability metrics that they committed on, and they did not meet it in halfway through the way?
So Smita, there hasn't been one where we would pull out, because once we are in there, it's our joint responsibility to make sure that the ENS action plan is delivered. Sure. So I wouldn't see a scenario where IFC would pull out. I would see scenarios where when we are quarterly tracking the achievement of the action plan, if there are misses, we make amends, we step in further, we help meet the gap. But have I had to walk away from certain investments for ESG reasons? Yes. And if you talk to some of my other colleagues, so I lead the disruptive tech practice, right? And because these are digital-first, disruptive, deep tech businesses, they are less likely to be doing stuff in the environment that is not right. But if you talk to my colleagues from the infra department, from the fund, they run 6 to 7 month assessments and oftentimes have to pause projects because they're not ENS compliant. In my case, the one episode I can share is there's this one digital platform that was a marketplace for seafood. And IFC just could not get comfortable with the fact that because they were buying fish from fishermen, it was likely that that was leading to overfishing of certain endangered species. So you were then harming the water systems around the country. And because our harbors are not certified, we would have had to do a 6-month-long study to figure out how to certify our harbors. And this was a digital tech platform, right? So in that 6 months, 2 rounds would have happened, right? So we lost that deal. And we weren't fast enough because our requirements would have been more time consuming. So yes, we've had to, there was another business which was actually using a tech platform to monitor and make animal trade happen. We walked away from that one because we couldn't get comfortable that the animals would be safe. So there have been situations where we'd have to say no to a deal, but wherever time permits and wherever we find that founders are willing to collaborate with us, we would like to put in place solutions that address the issue and then support them with an investment.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly what is needed for the ecosystem. So I've been told there are people in audience who are interested in asking questions. So if anybody wants to, we'll take 2 questions very quickly before we end the panel. Yes, I see your hand go up.
Strategy consultants and early stage investors. So are we mixing correlation with causation? There's a video put out just by Ashwath Damodaran, which has been sent to me recently, and he's saying ESG is not helping in investments make a lot of headway. So are we mixing correlation with causation? Because somebody, particularly big 1,000 companies, are going to have good managements and good processes anyway. So they step into ESG, fine, they'll deliver ESG results. So is it a correlation which we are mixing with causation, that ESG is helping you come up with good results? Thank you.
So, Mr. Joshi, can I assume your question means that because the top 1,000 companies are doing the ESG, why are we looking at startups also to do it? Because for the larger companies, it's okay, they have systems in place, but maybe the startups don't?
That's one part of it, but also that's an important part because I work with startups closely. Second, there's also the other part of it, and not denying the importance of ESG, that it may just be correlation and not causation. Have you people done any study which says that ESG is part of the causation, or good management of ESG is part of the cause which results in this, rather than it just happening along with? So 2 questions.
Okay. So I'll just maybe give a quick answer first, Ruchira and Rohan, and if you want to join in the discussion. Very quickly, I think we don't need any more studies, further studies to establish the fact that that the environment is degrading, and what are the causes for it. We are clearly seeing the impact. There's enough amount of devastation we are seeing all around. Are the businesses only responsible for it? Maybe, maybe not. Should they be taking the onus of it? Absolutely yes. Ask me why. Because any change that is required to be done needs intention and resources. Businesses have resources. If they bring in intention, they are a mass. They can actually bring in the change. So without getting into a lot of debates and discussions about this study or that, I would say forget about any study. Let's not even go to any researcher. We are living here, right? We can see what's happening to the air, what's happening to water, what's happening to nature. Somebody has to take charge. Of course, individuals can contribute, but that's where the ESG supports, that's where the responsible VCs and businesses should ideally take onus of it and work on it. Would that make, very interestingly, there are responsible customers who probably prefer such businesses, and therefore there is a reason for profitability also in that case. But I'll let Ruchira or Rohan if somebody wants to add to it.
Yes, I can add. Look, I totally get your question, and I would vehemently say it is causation, because for those businesses that are not ESG responsible, you will not eventually get long-term success. You can get short-term success, because in the short term, some of those things may not blow up. Bad governance will blow up sooner or later. Bad practices with employees, with stakeholders will blow up. Being destructive to the environment will backfire. And we've seen bad stories, right? So there's enough proof point to say not having a good ESG practice will ensure a bad outcome, right? So I think it's almost an imperative. It's not about causation or correlation anymore. I feel like it's an imperative today. And that's why investors don't want to touch businesses that are not geared up to follow through on sustainability.
Fair. Thank you.
Madhuri is not letting me ask one more question. But if there is any question, please, our panelists are still around. Feel free to reach out to us directly, and we are still around here. So thank you so much. Thank you, my dearest panelists, and thank you all the audience for your interest in our topic. Thank you.
Thank you.